This year, lawmakers in Washington approved a once-in-a-lifetime investment in the country's infrastructure.
Millions of dollars will be flowing into projects right here in Shreveport, and the city's next mayor will help determine how that money is spent.
Like
Crumbling roads,
aging pipes.
building a future starts with a strong foundation.
How do the candidates for Shreveport Mayor plan to address these issues?
We find out tonight.
Live from Southern University in Shreveport, your local election headquarters present the 2022 Shreveport Mayoral Forum, brought to you by Red River Credit Union.
Good evening and thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Dan Jovic.
And I'm Jackie Jovic. NBC6 is your local election headquarters. And tonight we're bringing you the final installment in a series of mayoral forums in partnership with the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce.
And we are joined now by the Chamber President, Dr. Timothy Magner, sharing a bit more about what is in store for you this evening. Timothy, good evening to you.
Good evening. Dr. Tim Magner, I'm the President of the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce, and delighted to welcome you to the Mayoral Forum series. We're delighted to be able to partner with our TV stations and our universities to be able to bring you the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates about the issues that are important to our community: public safety, economic development, and infrastructure. Tonight's topic is going to be infrastructure, and the candidates were selected based on publicly available information. And we'd like to thank our broadcast partner tonight, KTAL, our location partner tonight, Southern University Shreveport, for making this evening possible, and especially our candidates for stepping forward to run for office. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Magner. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the audience being here with us tonight at SUSLA, and we appreciate the fact that you will hold your applause until the end of tonight's ceremony.
And viewers at home can chime in as we stream live on Facebook at NBC6 News and on Twitter using the hashtag KTAL Mayoral Forum. We're also streaming on KTALnews.com. So we ask the candidates to address their answers to the audience.
And let's briefly go over the rules for this evening. Each candidate will have 1 minute for each question, and then response time will be strictly enforced.
Candidates will not directly engage with each other, as this is a forum and not a debate. The candidates will also have 1 minute for closing statements.
And that takes care of all the housekeeping that we have for this evening. But now let's meet the panel who's joining us tonight.
Tonight we have, in alphabetical order, former City Council member, Republican Tom Arceneaux, Caddo Parish Commissioner with no party affiliation, Mario Chavez.
We also have City Council member, Democrat LeVette Fuller, as well as current Mayor, Democrat Adrian Perkins. Candidates drew numbers to see who will go first tonight, and the first question this evening goes to Mario Chavez.
Mr. Chavez, what do you believe are the 3 most critical infrastructure issues facing the city, and how do you believe they should be addressed?
So first off, I get to talk with the most awesome news couple in the Arklatex, who has their very own vehicle wrap, so thank you for agreeing to do this, Dan and Jackie. To the Southern University, thanks for hosting us here, the Chamber of Commerce, and then the citizens of Shreveport, thank you for tuning in, because through this application process, we are going to figure out who is our next leader moving into 2023. So when we started this campaign some 8 months ago, we did exactly that. We went and we looked at what are the 3 topics that people most care about. And we went to every neighborhood and every district and we asked everybody, what do you want from the city? And the 3 most predominant things that we heard was crime, cleanliness, and customer service. Over and over again, the resounding thing when it came down to cleanliness and customer service was the infrastructure. It was the potholes, the city streets. It was the street lights that are out. It was the not maintained landscape. So we made a point on how do we actually address it, and we came out with that plan. And we're going to get in that plan tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Fuller?
Water and sewer infrastructure is probably the most critical thing, and then following that is going to be our roads and sidewalks. And rather than give you a third thing, I'm going to say that what we really have to focus on is our population density versus sprawl, because the major issue in paying for all of these things comes down to the fact that we are spreading a decreasing population thinner and thinner over more land area every time we annex in new neighborhoods. So the biggest problem is the third thing really is how are we going to pay for all of it? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, I don't want Mario to be the only one to kiss up to the moderators tonight, so thank you all for being here, and thank you to Southern University for being an amazing host. We partner with them constantly on a lot of different issues. The three top issues when it comes to infrastructure, in my opinion, is our subsurface infrastructure and streets. I'm going to put that in one category. Then it goes to broadband technology within our city and making sure we can have those wires, that broadband within every neighborhood in the city, because there's a huge digital divide right now. And the last thing that I'm going to point out is making sure that the city is not going it alone and saying that we need to engage our local, state, and federal partners more to get more dollars in infrastructure. And I'm just talking quickly about that subsurface infrastructure in our streets. We are under the largest capital project in Shreveport history with the federal consent decree. I adopted a government where we are going to have to spend $1.1 billion. So we're obviously going to have to make sure that program is extremely efficient. But my administration has already made some changes, and I'm going to be happy to talk about the progress we've made tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Arceneaux?
Well, I'm glad I had a chance to think through the question this time. I think that our biggest infrastructure issue is water and sewer, just like several of the other candidates have mentioned. I think the mayor has done a decent job of trying to get through some of that and postpone some of it and move it up quickly. We need to accelerate that in the next administration. Second thing would be our roads. A few weeks ago, I ran into a woman at one of these forums that said, well, she had just driven down Line Avenue and it had done $1,800 worth of damage to her front end. We obviously have to do something about the maintenance of our roads and streets before we ask the people for additional funds. And the final thing I would bring out is the people infrastructure. Infrastructure can mean more than roads and bridges and valves and pipes. It can also mean people, and we need to invest in the people of Shreveport.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And candidates, please know flattery will get you everywhere with us. So we'll move along to the second question. And Ms. Fuller, it's going to be addressed to you first. When and how could Shreveport restart its curbside recycling?
Well, I will start off by flattering you because I know both of you personally. I think that you're lovely human beings. How about that? I think that the hard truth about recycling is that to some degree it's a sham. The demand for plastic recycling is just very, very low, and it's really, really going to be more about us as consumers using less plastics, and that way we don't have as much going into the landfill. But there are things that we should be looking at as far as ways that we can use plastic possibly as a asphalt fill to go into our roads, and I'd love to talk to you about that later. In fact, you should email me, check my website, LeVetteFuller.com, and I'd love to have that discussion. But as far as curbside here, if we're going to do it, we have to retool it to something that's more like just looking at paper, cardboard, glass, aluminum, but it wouldn't be plastics because there's just no demand for it.
Ms. Fuller, thank you very much. Mr. Perkins.
I'm actually really happy that Councilwoman Fuller started off with that question because the City Council plays a large role in it, and obviously the Mayor's office is a partner in making sure that we can reinstate curbside pickup. But I'm going to tell the public, we have to start by appropriating more dollars to that program. And we know that it's difficult. The last time the amount of dollars that we appropriated wasn't very sufficient, and we did not have many people bid for that particular program. So I'm hoping that, well, I will say in this current budget, we've allocated more dollars so that we'll be able to put more dollars out for bid, and we'll be able to attract more people to do that curbside pickup. I got to say that it's imperative, and we're okay with allocating more dollars because we in the state of Louisiana, we're experiencing you know, a disproportionate impact by global warming and other things where we know that we have to be responsible with recycling. We have to be responsible and have more sustainable sources of energy and things of that nature. So it's a priority for our administration. We want to make sure we're green and we're looking out for the future of not just Shreveport, but for the globe.
Mr. Perkins, thank you. Mr. Arceneaux.
Recycling depends on a market. Recycling only makes sense if it can pay for itself. Putting additional dollars into recycling where we pick up curbside and most of the material still goes into the landfill doesn't save us any money. And we shouldn't be charging our taxpayers and ratepayers, because that's who is paying for it, is water customers, not the general tax base. So I am not in favor of anything that doesn't have a perspective of paying for itself.
Mr. Arceneaux, thank you. And lastly, Mr. Chavez.
Dan, thank you. Along the campaign trail, we've heard many people that have asked that very question, and we actually laid that out on our plan. With recycling, I grew up in California, and I moved here when I was 15. I'm 42 now. And back in California, we didn't just have 2 trash cans, we actually had 3. That third trash can was for compost. We live in a high water table in Louisiana, and that's thankful. We're going to be lucky in 50 years when we realize that we have the water capacity that Texas doesn't, and we start selling them water. That's another topic. But for now, when we live in the high water table and we look at this vegetation that we're cutting and we're throwing in our landfill, and we're filling up our landfill with organic waste, and we're not utilizing smokeless incinerators to take that down, how do we get the most out of what we have? How do we use 3 trash cans to get the recycling for not only the plastic and be responsible for the environment? So we've exactly looked at just like that. ChristFit is a local company that's doing that, and they're actually hiring people that were recently incarcerated, putting them back to work and giving them jobs by recycling and being responsible to the environment. We're going to look at that. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, thank you.
Mr. Perkins, you will have the chance to answer this question first. What is your plan to improve our water system so that Shreveport can avoid some of the same issues we've seen in Jackson, Mississippi?
Yes, that's a great question. What we've already done as administration is we inherited the consent decree, as I already pointed out, and what we realized early on was that the city of Shreveport spent twice the amount of money on half of the work. We had spent over $400 million when I came into office, and we had only gotten half the amount of work that was needed. So the first thing that we did was we changed leadership. We changed that project management team to CDM, from CDM to Burns and McDonnell, and they've slowed the project down so that we can actually execute it more responsibly. We cannot waste dollars when you're talking about $1 billion project. So that's step one. As we roll that program back out, we have to make sure that it's equity in that program. Another thing we realized with the former project management team was they were sending seasoned inspectors out to certain areas of the community and inspectors that had little experience in others. We have to make sure when we're tearing up our roads and repairing our water system that no matter what neighborhood you're in, you're getting a quality source of water.
Thank you. Mr. Arceneaux.
Well, as we all learned in snowpocalypse of 2021, having a reliable water supply is very important. One of the things that we must do is to make sure that we learn from the lessons from what occurred in 2021 and that we have an effective emergency plan so that should we encounter something similar or be threatened with something similar, we have a quick response. I know I got pretty tired of shoveling snow into my bathtub so that we would have flushing water. The drinking water was not a problem. The flushing water was the problem.
That was an adventure for sure. Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Jackie. As a business owner, I tell my employees often, you inspect what you expect. So if you lay out a plan and you lay out the vision to the employees on how you want to see this water, how you want to see the quality, then you go and you do quarterly inspections. We've talked about this for the last 7 months, and how do we make available to the citizens the concrete data to show the various areas around the city of Shreveport where you can go online and get pure water testing on what is currently going on in your own neighborhood. We think that's valuable data. Healthy drinking is one of the greatest assets of any society, and to have healthy kids, to have healthy communities, it's going to come down to healthy drinking water. We demand accountability for our kids, and we're going to put that on the website to showcase everybody how we score in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller.
It's important to have transparency in processes like this, and I wouldn't wish to cast aspersions on the inspectors that were a part of the last program because they were very much local people, and I'm concerned about the number of local minority contractors that are no longer working because we did have a slowdown in the work, and so that means we're only saving money right now because there are not shovels in the dirt making jobs for local people to actually work on those repairs. But moving forward, I think that we can save money on the consent decree program through storm water management, including green infrastructure programs. I would love to have more time to talk about this because it's something that I'm very interested in, but we can actually use new technologies, new innovations in order to offset the cost of the consent decree program and actually get some offsets from the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start with Mr. Arceneaux for question 4. Mr. Arceneaux, city has several facilities that are unusable due to age and a lack of maintenance. Fairgrounds Field is the most recent example of this. As mayor, how would you balance the need for preserving all structures while also recognizing the need to remove blight, maintain safety, and develop new facilities?
Well, certainly, I believe that we ought to restore and maintain those structures that are restorable and maintainable. But there are structures that simply are not restorable and maintainable. Certainly, I don't know much about the baseball plan, and we'll certainly want to learn about that. But the plan, the proposal that was made to stop the destruction of Fairgrounds Field might have some merit, but only if the city doesn't have to pay any part of it, and any renovation, any restoration and renovation and demolition costs are covered by whoever would take that over. Each one of those decisions has to be a financial decision, and we have to base it on the economic realities of what we're facing. I certainly enjoy living in a historic district, and I want to preserve as many buildings as possible, but sometimes we just can't do that.
Mr. Arceneaux, thank you. Mr. Chavez.
So the fact that we have so many ample amounts of facilities and inventory in our portfolio, we need someone to go in there and take a solid look at the inventory to see what all the assets that we have on hand, what are on our tax rolls that are on our sheet that we have to pay for, that we need to get off of to get in commerce and get revenue positive. We need an entire team at the mayor's office that knows how to do this, that can go in there and look at our buildings from an asset management standpoint on what can be brought back into commerce, what do we have to get rid of, and how do we utilize the assets of going around the country to see what they've done in other places to revamp and reutilize the buildings that we have and bring them back into commerce. That's one thing that we're going to do, is we're going to figure out how do we get these buildings back into commerce, and the ones that we cannot resurrect, that we need to figure out ways to incentivize other companies to come in and buy these assets from us and get these off the tax rolls. That's what we're going to do.
Mr. Chavez, thank you. Ms. Fuller.
I will praise this administration for starting to actually take inventory of all the assets that we have on our tax rolls right now that are not being productive. But one thing that I think we need to think about is taking care of what we have for who we have, and we will be able to actually remove some of these things from our tax rolls by making them available to the public for auction so that we can actually get them into private enterprise. But another thing that concerns me is that we chase shiny and new instead of looking out for the actual community. If we want to see more tax revenue in this community, we need to work on revitalizing our inner city neighborhoods, and that might not be the best way to say that. It might not sound as kind and friendly as you want, but the core communities in this city deserve attention and deserve to be treated as well-attended, well-cared for, so that we can actually have tax dollars in those areas that actually support the entire city. And then we can afford the nice things that we say we want as amenities.
Ms. Fuller, thank you. Lastly, Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, well, thank you, Councilwoman, for pointing out this administration has already taken an inventory of the assets that we have. And I got to tell you, what we realized early on is that there was no maintenance budget that was symmetric with the actual capital that we have here, those capital projects, those buildings. And any organization needs to make sure that their maintenance costs are aligned with the capital costs as they build things off. So we've been trying to repair that. As we've acquired, or as we are building new and shiny things, like we just built the or finished Fire Station 9 on Greenwood Road, we make sure that there are maintenance dollars within that budget. But we do have to grow our maintenance program overall in the city, and I'm proposing in our next term to have an actual maintenance enterprise fund, and I'm actually going to ask our Caddo Commission to assist us with that, considering that they collect 5.92 mills from the citizens of Shreveport, when the citizens of Shreveport only collect the city of Shreveport only collect 1.13 mills. So I think that would be a great place to bring in partners so that we can help maintain the assets that we have.
Mr. Perkins, thank you.
Mr. Chavez, you'll have the opportunity to answer this question first. Some believe downtown parking is a significant challenge. As mayor, what changes would you make to increase access to affordable parking?
So in regards to downtown parking, I'm sorry, Liz, because I know you're in the audience. I would like to remove paid parking downtown and allow it to be free. We want to welcome people downtown. We want extreme commerce. I would like to take all the one-way streets and make them two-way. I found a lot of people that try to come downtown, they get confused trying to come downtown. I want to have a more walkability environment where you go to big cities and you walk around and you see lots of commerce and you see people walking around and there's festivals and there's fun. I want to see that, and I think we all want to see that in our downtown. And I know we can. I know we can go downtown and we can say that this is the city, the downtown city, that we thrived for decades, and we'll have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller?
Thank you for this question. I love this question. I wish I had more than a minute to delve into it. 45-degree parking where we can throughout downtown would actually thicken the amount of parking that we have. There's a CPAT study. American Planning Association provided a study for this area that explained that we have a lot of parking, it's just not in the places people want it. One thing that we need to do is put up wayfinding signs that make it easier for people to know how far they are from where they're trying to go. And a lot of times, it's not that there isn't parking, it's just that our city doesn't feel walkable in the downtown, so it feels like you're going further than you actually are. And there are things that we can do as far as our sidewalks. I have placed money for improving our sidewalks, improving our streetscaping, improving the trees and the shade in downtown. But that's one of the things: shade, awnings, wider, well-prepared sidewalks that will actually help us to feel like we're not walking as far. And I do think that there's an opportunity for us to put some revenue toward parking garages.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Councilwoman Fuller is going to be well versed on this because that's her district, but I think I have a bit of an advantage as well because I live and work downtown. And I got to tell you all, we work super close with the Downtown Development Authority. And something that we've realized as downtown is growing today, which it is that when it comes to parking, we have to place it in strategic places. There is parking available downtown. If you might have to drive around a little bit right now, but when it comes to bigger and better developments, which we're going through right now, we have to make sure that we are building up parking in other locations that is currently not available downtown. And once we do that, we'll see even more development downtown. Right now, there's over a 90% occupancy rate with a residential occupancy rate downtown, and we expect that number to just continue to grow considering all the projects that are going on. We have over $50 million in federal tax credits going on downtown, so parking is critical, but I think in working with the Downtown Development Authority, that we have a solid plan to make sure that that growth continues.
Thank you. Mr. Arceneaux?
The merchants and the office, people who have offices downtown have a real interest in effective parking, but they also have an interest in making sure parking is available. The reason that I would oppose free parking downtown is that free parking will be taken up by the workers who want free parking all day long in the downtown area. And if you do that, then you don't have a market mechanism that's helping people to make decisions about where they would park. So I will tell you that most of the time when clients come to see me in my office, and I've been in downtown for over 40 years, when clients come to see me in my office, they usually don't have any trouble. We provide free parking in the parking garage that's next to our building, but many of our clients are happy to park on the street, and they do not have trouble finding parking on the street. I think we need to do a better job of educating people about the available parking downtown.
Thank you.
Next question will be for Ms. Fuller first. Street lighting is one visible indicator of our city's infrastructure challenges. What steps do you believe need to be taken to repair and to replace the lighting throughout the city?
We've been very lucky to work with Foster Campbell's office to get some grants to improve some of our lighting, but I do think that it's one of the things that in the present, we need more staff and more equipment in order to move faster at repairs and replacing. But I think that in the long term, we're going to end up needing more money, in particular for downtown, where we have new light bulbs, new LED instruments, but we're going to need to deal with the appliances. And actually, just going back to downtown for a minute, in order to make it more attractive and more tax productive, which is something that sustains the entire city, lighting, improving our lampposts, improving the aesthetics is something that will go a long way. And I think that that is going to be something that needs to have specific priority revenues for it as a line item, and possibly in the future a transparent and well thought out bond.
Ms. Fuller, thank you. Mr. Perkins.
At this time, I'd just like to thank the citizens for voting for the public safety bond, because in that bond was $5 million specifically for lights. We're assessing the neighborhoods that need it most right now, and you will be seeing our neighborhoods get much, much brighter in the future. So thank you for that investment. But Councilwoman has already pointed out, we also partner with the Public Service Commission as well to pay for lights within our city. But earlier, I alluded to the fact that the Parish Commission collects a 5.92 mil for public works. That goes to infrastructure, and that can go to lighting as well. I would like to see the parish give the city more assistance, collecting almost $6 million. And since I've been in office, the only assistance that we've gotten from the parish thus far is a traffic light on Southern Loop that was $200,000. If you do the math, collecting nearly $6 million a year is not there yet. So I'd like to close that gap at the city of Shreveport so that we can light our city up and we can all feel safer and we can see more commerce.
Mr. Perkins, thank you very much. Mr. Arceneaux.
Street lighting in neighborhoods is quite important because that's where people feel safe walking outside. If you want to make a neighborhood walkable, particularly as we're about to get out of daylight savings time, you have to provide good lighting for after work hours and let people feel safe in their own neighborhoods. That means we have to work with SWEPCO. We have to decide who is going to be responsible for bulb replacement and how it will be done. One of the things we might consider doing is to have regular inspections and also put signage to let people know how do they report a light that is out. It is true the government cannot fix something that it doesn't know about. I know from my experience on the council that occasionally people would call about a problem and no one at the city was even aware that the problem existed until somebody called about it. We need to make sure that people know who to call and how to call.
Mr. Arceneaux, thank you. Mr. Chavez.
So the number one topic is obviously crime when it comes to the citizens of Shreveport, and that was what we heard over the last 8 months. But to decrease the crime, it's obviously lighting up the neighborhoods. We want high visibility neighborhoods that look very safe for our residents. One of the things that I realized is a lot of people told me they would call down to the city and they would report the light was out, and then a month later they'd call down there and no traction whatsoever. So sometimes politicians are all talk, but what I want to do is we actually have a Southern Hills mobile app where we made this for my district in Southern Hills. We created an app that would allow people to go online and actually report a street light that is out. And we have that, and we've had that for the last 3 years. And that's outlaid in our 100-day plan is how do citizens report issues? How do they report potholes, street lights out? One of the coolest things, I was talking with the government director of SWEPCO just last week, and he said they're about to roll that very thing out with SWEPCO. So the city of Shreveport is going to be able to include an overlay with the SWEPCO, and we can get this accomplished. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, thank you very much.
Mr. Perkins, you will answer this question first. You just mentioned the public safety bond that voters passed. Several other recent bond proposals have not been approved by voters. What messages do you believe voters need to hear to support additional infrastructure investments?
Yes, I mean, with snowpocalypse that was already referenced, you know, those instances are make a much stronger argument than I can ever make to our citizens that we need to be investing in our infrastructure. Although those bonds, you know, a lot of those bonds fell, this administration, we've still been able to make things happen. I've talked about some ideas tonight on how in a second term we'll be able to do even more, and we really have to get our local partners involved. When it comes to our water system here, one thing that I do want to point out in comparison to Jackson, Mississippi, is that despite that bond failing, we were still able to make a $25 million investment at the Amos water plant so that we can have an alternative pump so that if ever our main pump goes down, we can still have a pump and people in Shreveport can have water. So despite those bonds failing, we're still making it happen, but there's still a lot to be done. And the message that I want to tell our citizens as well is when we vote for public safety only, but we turn down technology and infrastructure, we're sending a very bad message to the young people of this city who are considering staying here in the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Arceneaux.
There were a couple of lessons that I gleaned from the failure of the bond issue. Number one is that the people of Shreveport believe that they want to see that we're taking care of what we have before we look for new and shiny things. The second thing is that they want to know where monies are going to be spent. The city of Shreveport has received over $70 million from the federal government as a result of COVID relief. There has been very little transparency about where that money went and how it is to be spent and whether some of that would have been available for infrastructure needs.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm not going to steal Councilwoman's goldfish quote, so I will say, though, it's all about accountability. I don't feel that the voters, I don't feel that the citizens of Shreveport trust our current government. I don't think that they think that our current government operates with the integrity to manage the budget. I think that's resounding with a no on everything except public safety. I know the citizens of Shreveport love our fire and police. It's apparent. I personally voted for that bond. The other ones, I voted just like the citizens of Shreveport because I did not trust that the city of Shreveport would take care of us when it came to the integrity of the budget. I want to see somebody in City Hall that has everybody in Shreveport, in all neighborhood, all of us, has our best interest at heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
I wasn't going to talk about the goldfish tonight, but I hope you'll read the newspaper on Sunday because I mentioned them there. But it's about taking care of what we have and proving that we can take care of what we have before we ask for something else. And when it comes to transparency and a thorough study for doing a bond, in 2011, when the citizens went out for bond, the Citizens Review Committee that reviewed all of that met for 100 hours at least, meeting maybe twice a month for a year to put together down to the nickel exactly what needed to be in that bond, looking at the entire community. And then that city council adopted those projects in that list by resolution before it was ever put on the ballot. If we want people to support us, we have to be thorough, we have to be transparent, and even when we were down to the penny, Knight Street, which was a part of that 2011 bond, still isn't complete. And that's what I'm hearing back. Not that we should be reproaching you, but that we are under a mandate to be more transparent and more trustworthy.
Thank you.
Our next question will begin with you, Mr. Arceneaux. The condition of city streets varies considerably. As mayor, what steps do you believe need to be taken to address the need for repair, repaving, or even the replacement of a given city street?
The most important thing we can do is to set priorities based on two things. One is need, and the second thing is visibility. When you have as many streets that are under bad repair as we have, the most important thing we can do is to start with our gateway areas. And those are areas, for example, like North Market Street, Lyon Avenue. Those are places where Uri Drive, those are places that people come into the city, and that is the first thing that they see. And after we have addressed those issues significantly, then we can go to other areas based on need. And the need has nothing to do with neighborhood. It has to do with the condition of the streets and the needs in the particular neighborhoods, particularly in our inner city neighborhoods that are really the heart of the city of Shreveport.
Mr. Arceneaux, thank you. Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Dan. So we've looked at this in great study, and what a lot of people wanted is they wanted a gridded out system where we looked at all the major thoroughfares to see where all the big businesses are coming in, where we're taking our children to school, the most traveled thoroughfares, and start working on those first and foremost, and guarantee that we have a gridded out system to where every neighborhood and every city council person is represented, to where they have a say to make sure that the streets are done correctly. And when it comes to economic development, that's one thing that we need to look at is how are we going to fix the streets if we have a shortage of budget? If we bring in more business, if we grow more industry, if we have more revenue, then we will have the assets in our budget to fix these streets. We can either A, take care of the money that we have and fix the streets, but if we don't have enough, we need to grow business. We can go out for bond, but the citizens need to trust that the city of Shreveport is going to do what we say we're going to do with the budget.
Mr. Chavez, thank you. Ms. Fuller.
Attracting business without having regard for your citizen residents means you may not have anyone to help with your sales tax because they will all have moved away. There is a study underway right now from a company called Urban 3 that is creating a heat map of the areas of this city that are actually more productive block by block in property and sales tax. And what you're going to find out when you see this is that the areas that are the most productive on sales tax and have the highest return on investment are often the most neglected. In fact, when we put visibility ahead of need, what you're hearing is that the areas that are currently neglected will continue to be neglected. And that is not going to help us to encourage a tax base and have a vibrant community that people actually want to be a part of. And it further proves that we have a hostile environment when it comes to poor people in this community. And that heat map also, it's the same heat map that you see for crime. It's the same heat map you see for failing schools.
Ms. Fuller, thank you very much. Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, when you step into the mayor's office, you inherit the good and the bad with government. In talking about our streets, we inherited a very bad situation. Our street special revenue fund is about $6 to $7 million a year, yet our engineering report has told the citizens of Shreveport, and we publish it every year, that we need to be spending $30 million just to maintain our roads because of the size of our city. That is a huge gap, but yet our administration has gone above and beyond to produce more dollars for our citizens. But in speaking about transparency, even with the bond, we went out for dozens of town halls to talk about where those dollars would go, to solicit input from citizens. And some of our elected officials, even some here today, were not present. So we can't be even more transparent than that. We are trying because we see the need. In addition to making sure that the city of Shreveport is improving and expanding those street special revenue dollars, again, we're going to lean on our partners that are collecting your tax dollars to help pay for more roads to be repaired.
Mr. Perkins, thank you.
Mr. Chavez, you'll have the opportunity to answer this question first. One critique of the Metropolitan Planning Commission has been the lack of resources focused on developing and implementing long-term infrastructure planning. What steps will you take as mayor to develop and adhere to long-term infrastructure planning?
Jackie, thanks for that question. I've actually been working with the Metropolitan Planning Commission for the last 7 years. I've helped a lot of businesses go down there and try to get open and help them navigate through the process. I know just over the last 3 years, they have been a lot more business friendly, and I'm very thankful for that. When we first got on board, we realized that they did not have a means to where the average business could go online and figure out how do you open a food truck, how do you set up a restaurant. It was very hard to navigate that. From the Caddo Parish Commission, I found federal funds via the COVID money where we got to fund them a website that will allow citizens that are aspiring entrepreneurs to go online to put their plan in place, and it will give them a roadmap of a step-by-step on how to plan their business. And what I can say is they've hired more people, and they have more of a planning aspect now, and I'm thankful for what they've been doing down there.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fuller?
So I've been the chair, well, I was the chair for 3 years, I'm not this year, of the Infrastructure and Long-Range Planning Committee for the City Council, and that has given me quite a bit of insight as far as our infrastructure issues and the way that we plan. We have been in a triage mode for a very, very long time, but the way that we work with the MPC is that they have a board that supervises the director supervises his staff. Well, the role that we have in that one is appointing to that board, but also I think that we could put some leverage on them with the funding that is provided to see that they actually start to focus less on restrictions and regulations, and often case-by-case basis regulations that keep the authority with the director. We should actually put caveats on our funds to insist that some of it is going directly to long-range planning for the future of this community. Planning should be the operative word in Metropolitan Planning Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, a lot of citizens don't know, but the MPC now falls under the city of Shreveport. That began on January 1st of this year. Prior to that, it was an entity that was managed by the city and the parish. And when you have that mommy-daddy relationship, as I describe it as, a lot of things can fall through the cracks. Now that the city has it, we have a lot of reforms into place to make sure that we are cutting red tape at the MPC and things are more efficient. But tying the MPC to the topic at hand tonight, which is infrastructure, I got to tell you, I'm extremely excited about the fact that the city of Shreveport received a $30 million raise grant. It's the largest raise grant in the state of Louisiana so that we can actually improve our medical corridor. We can create businesses, not just with healthcare, but in technology as well. And I'm looking forward to the way that the MPC is going to manage their business growth in our area. Not only is it going to improve our infrastructure, but it's also going to improve our economy. And that's something that this administration went out and guided and that we're excited about for us to implement over the next 4 years.
Thank you. Mr. Arceneaux?
Having worked in the land use area for over 40 years, I've done a lot of work with the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And over time, the Metropolitan Planning Commission has become more of a Metropolitan Get-in-the-Way Commission or more of a Metropolitan Enforcement to see. We need enforcement of zoning laws without question, but we're not focusing enough on planning and the positive aspects of development within the city. We need to streamline that process, make it easier for people to know what the rules are, and when they're entitled to do a development, that permit go through quickly rather than, as Ms. Fuller pointed out, having to put all of those things before the executive director for a decision that is in his discretion.
Thank you.
Ms. Fuller, we're going to start with you with our next question. The city's population is declining, and our maintenance costs continue to increase. What elements of the city's infrastructure budget do you believe need to be reduced or redirected to support critical infrastructure maintenance and repairs?
I think that any of our funding that we have needs to be redirected into the core of our community. We will see a higher return on investment for every single dollar we have if we focus on our downtown and the neighborhoods surrounding, which are older, often most neglected areas, where you also see spikes in crime that I mentioned earlier as far as heat maps on where negative things happen. So while we are looking at the streets that we have as priorities, I think we already know that those priorities are in that same area that is that heat map, and all of our funds need to be redirected to where this new assessment is going to say we are getting a higher return on investment for those tax dollars, but not seeing those same levels of attention to maintenance and repairs and replacements.
Ms. Fuller, thank you. Mr. Perkins.
Yes, that's just not a conversation that we are having at that moment, and there's no market indicators to say that we need to be making cuts. We have broken multiple revenue records since my administration has been in office. We're the second fastest recovering economy in the state of Louisiana, and we're the fourth fastest growing. And I would argue that we're actually like top two, but that's another conversation. With the additional revenue that's coming in, we've already talked about all the needs in our city. We already talked about that huge deficit between the $6 million that's spent on roads right now and the $30 million that we need. If we really want to continue to close those gaps, we don't need to talk about cutting. We need to talk about holding the other local entities and our state entities accountable when it comes to investing in infrastructure. And I know you're saying the mayor is really beating this dead horse, and that is the reason why, is because this is something that not only the mayor's office can do in engaging our local partners, but it's something that citizens can do in holding those other local entities accountable for the tax dollars that they collect from you. Our roads will be repaired. We'll have more lights. We can have more broadband in our streets. Our city can grow if we hold them accountable.
Mr. Perkins, thank you. Mr. Arceneaux.
I believe in you, the voters of Shreveport, the citizens of Shreveport, and I believe that if we provide you with the transparent information about what your budget choices are and the implications of those choices, you will support the right choices. So what we need to do is to lay out those choices to you very clearly. I developed a budget process when I served on the City Council that did precisely that, and we were able to make priority decisions almost by consensus in every regard. Most of you want the very same things that everybody else wants. If we give you the information, you will support the right decisions.
Mr. Arceneaux, thank you. Lastly, Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to agree with the mayor on this one. If in business, you've heard this saying, in good times you advertise, in bad times you have to. Well, if we're in good times, if we have the $36 million increase that the mayor's office has said that we have, if it's time to buckle down and figure out how do we spend these funds accordingly, how do we clean up our city, how do we decrease our crime, how do we well light, how do we get the education that we want, how do we build the economic development driver and the engine that's going to boost Shreveport into the next level, if we have the funds on hand and we clean up the city, and by doing exactly that, we entice our kids to come back home. We tell America that we're open for business, and they come in and open up shop, and before we know it, it's a circle effect where we have even more revenue coming in, more jobs. We're going to have the money. We're not going to be talking about cuts. We're going to be talking about what new shiny things that we may need in 10 years. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, thank you.
Mr. Perkins, you're up first for this next question. HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge says housing is infrastructure. What will you do as mayor to make sure the city invests in affordable housing?
Yes, we're already investing in affordable housing, having just cut the ribbon on that $30 million federal grant that we received from HUD. But we do need to go much further when it comes to affordable housing. I'm working very closely with Bonnie Moore, who is a guru on this and who has been in our community putting in the Lord's work for decades now to make sure that each and every citizen can have access to affordable housing. But we have to do more. During the post-pandemic, we know that housing prices skyrocketed provided, and it really squeezed a lot of our households. But I got to tell you, the way that we can get at this is going to be in two tiers, not just building out that housing stock, but also making sure that we have a strong economy. And I just pointed out that our economy is very strong. It's one of the top in the state, and we have to do that so that people aren't just having a job, but they're actually having careers, that they can pay for the housing that's available. So we have this two-pronged approach. It's been working thus far, and we're going to continue to rely on our experts so that the citizens of Shreveport have access to that housing.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Arceneaux?
One of the largest needs we have is for affordable housing for home ownership. If you walk in neighborhoods, you can tell the difference in many instances between homes that are owned by the people who are dwelling in them and homes that are not. That's not to say that the tenants are lousy. They're not. They're just usually not in as good a position to make an affordable decision. There are current programs that are available to help people to own their homes, to put in sweat equity. That's a place where we can really invest in our inner city communities to increase home ownership percentages in those communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Jackie. So when I moved here from California, I was 15, and I moved here because General Motors shut down in California. And then sadly, General Motors shut down here. And I saw what happened to Southern Hills. I moved into Southern Hills in 1995. I think 1990 was really the heyday for Shreveport. That's when South Park Mall was booming. We've had a carousel. I don't know if you guys remember that. But slowly over the years, a lot of the neighbors moved out, and a lot of the homes turned into rent homes. And unfortunately, that was the main reason why I ran 7 years ago for the Caddo Parish Commission, because I saw the degradation of the neighborhood, and I didn't like it. I saw a lot of my family move away, and I wanted to restore the neighborhood. And looking at the American dream, it's home ownership. It's how do we move people from their current socioeconomic environment into a better one. It's teaching them how to have job placement, job training, workforce development. It's getting that American dream of home ownership. And I think our city needs to be responsible for helping our community to do that very thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
So much about this does come down to the Metropolitan Planning Commission, our master plan for this community, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say, while we do need home ownership, pathways to home ownership as well, we shouldn't stigmatize renters, because rental property isn't privy to homestead exemption, and we get a lot of revenue from that. We need mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods throughout this city, communities that are walkable, bikeable, safe for children, and we can incentivize filling in the gaps where we're putting in these, where we have these vacant lots now where we've been demolishing houses that need to go while we're removing blight. What we should be doing is filling in those gaps with new homes at every level. And when you have a mix of people of different incomes living together, you actually also have an opportunity to improve your school system and get more kids into neighborhood schools.
Thank you.
Great points of view all the way around. We're going to start with you, Mr. Arceneaux, for our next question here. Throughout the years, city leaders have been discussing the possibility of transforming the Jimmy Davis Bridge into a linear park. As mayor, what would you like to see done with the Jimmy Davis Bridge?
I heard a very good presentation by Representative Thomas Presley about the options that are available to it. I personally do not believe that a linear park on Jimmy Davis Bridge is going to be successful. I think it's going to be a drain, and I don't think it will be well used. It's just too large a span, and in an area there really isn't a lot of population for pedestrian traffic. So my thought on Jimmy Davis Bridge, we need to look at another alternative, and I do understand that removing the bridge is really not an alternative under the federal regulations.
Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Dan. When I heard of the linear park idea, I thought it was actually rather dangerous. I didn't think it'd be a good idea for kids to be playing on a bridge above the river, so I thought that was not a good idea. As a pedestrian crosswalk for somebody that's riding, or if we want that bikeable, walkable city that we're talking about, I don't see a bad idea to have a pedestrian bridge that gets us from Shreveport over to Bossier if we cannot take it down. So that's what I'm thinking about it.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller.
The High Line is a really interesting linear park in New York, but that is in an area that's already walkable, and so that makes sense. It could be possible that this could be a bikeable bridge, possible, but at what price tag? I ask you, as the citizens, would you rather see tens of millions of dollars going to a bike path over the water, or would you like to see us put that funding back into our infrastructure within the city? Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Fuller, thank you. And Mr. Perkins.
Yes, so this administration obviously is dealing with it right now, and the state essentially told us, hey, if you want a newer bridge, you're going to have to accept this linear bridge idea. And I know there's a lot of doubt about it, but as Councilwoman Fuller's already pointed out, there are communities in this country that have a ton of success with linear bridges. When you're talking about state funding and a state-funded project, we had to make sure that, number one, we get a new bridge to make sure that commerce continues, number two, that it's safe, and if that third option or the third component of this project means that we have to have a linear bridge, then we're going to have to make sure and do everything that we can that is successful. We have Clyde Fant Parkway, so I'm hoping that in the design of that linear bridge, we can create a natural feeder from the parkway to the bridge, whether it's biking, whether it's walking. But our administration in this particular position, we got to make the best of the scenario, so that's what we're focused on right now.
Mr. Perkins, thank you very much. And candidates, thank you very much for your answers to the questions this evening thus far. And that's all the time we have for the questions. We're going to move on now to our closing statements.
And I just want to say thank you all for staying so closely to the time. It's been a pleasure. And a reminder, you'll each have 1 minute for your closing statements, except for you, Mr. Arceneaux. You did not flatter the host, so I think you're deducted 10 seconds. We drew numbers again before this forum, and Mr. Chavez, you get to go first. Your time starts now.
Absolutely. So to the citizens of Shreveport, thank you so much for tuning in again. I know this was a 3-day ordeal, and you got to hear from everybody. I thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said at the beginning, we started this campaign going out to the neighborhood and hearing what everybody had to say. We wanted to make sure that we went to every neighborhood, every district, and heard the wants and the wishes of you, the people of Shreveport. We compiled a plan that is not just my plan, it's our plan, and it's a solid plan. And you can find it online at www.voteMarioChavez.com. And we want to continue to hear from you. Over the last 8 months, we put the plan on there, and we want to address crime, cleanliness, and customer service, and we heard from thousands of people. It was so nice having people reach out to tell us their advice, their opinions, and how they want to see their city serve them. We're going to continue to do that up until November the 8th to take all your ideas and continue to add them to the plan. Thank you, Shreveport.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
Thank you so much to KTAL, our lovely hosts, the Chamber of Commerce, and to Southern University for hosting us this evening. Thank you all for being here and for watching at home. I have served on a board that I founded, Reform Shreveport, which has been looking at infrastructure in our built environment for ways that we can make our city more livable and safer. And I'm often saying that a city is more than a balance sheet. We're not just a business, we're a living organism with so many different components. And I've learned through Reform Shreveport and also serving on the National Board for Strong Towns that a lot of cities are facing the same issues that we are when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to crime, when it comes to trying to make your city the best place it can be for the people who are here, so those jobs can be created within your city by entrepreneurs that are already here and new people coming in that want to be investing in this area. I'm asking for your vote on November 8th because I believe that my vision for a comprehensive and holistic way of making the city better is the best one for our community at this juncture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Yes, I'd like to thank our hosts as well this evening, and to all the citizens that are here present, and also those of you that are tuning in for being educated in this political process. And in closing, I got to say, I grew up in a neighborhood, the Pine Valley section of Cedar Grove, and we didn't have sidewalks. I go into the office every single day, and my hope and my vision for this city is for every neighborhood to have walkable sidewalks, for every neighborhood to have safe streets. And as I've pointed out tonight, time and time again, the city of Shreveport is investing every dollar available in doing that. I encourage every citizen that are here tonight to go and look at our budget and look where those dollars are going. And then I want you to go and look at the parish's budget and look at where your tax dollars are going. See if they are being allocated towards that infrastructure that we've discussed today. Then I want you to go and look at the state's budget and see where your dollars are going. If we want our infrastructure to improve and be the safe city that we know Shreveport can be and the walkable city that we know Shreveport can be, we're going to have to hold those other government agencies accountable.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Arceneaux.
I've been serving you, the citizens of Shreveport, for over 40 years in one capacity or another. Because of that experience, I have the depth and breadth of relationships to bring us together and to move our city forward. What I'm asking you tonight is to give me the opportunity to continue serving you by serving as your mayor for the next 4 years and maybe a little longer than that. The term is only 4, but I plan to be around as long as you'll have me. I ask for your vote on November the 8th, number 64, Tom Arceneaux for Mayor of Shreveport.
Candidates, thank you so very much. And on behalf of Jackie and I, and on behalf of KTAL NBC 6, we appreciate you guys stepping forward, and Ms. Fuller as well, I shouldn't say guys, lady as well, stepping forward and wanting to serve, wanting to make our community a better place. It is appreciated. It is noted. So do know that. Thank you. I want to give a round of applause to the candidates. Their answers were wonderful this evening. And we would also like to give a round of applause to you in attendance this evening and those of you tuning in at home. Thank you, as the mayor said, for being an educated voter. Educated voters make a difference in our community.
They certainly do, and thank you all for participating in the process.
Reminder for you that early voting starts on Tuesday, October the 25th, and Election Day is November the 8th. Tonight we only heard from 4 of the 10 candidates that are running for mayor.
You can find profiles on each of the candidates on our website, ktalnews.com, and the NBC6 News Now app. Right after this broadcast, our digital anchor, Brittany DeFran, will have a local expert on to share analysis on tonight's forum. You can join the conversation on ktalnews.com.
It's going to be an interesting conversation. A lot of topics were touched on this evening. And we want to say thank you to the candidates, as we did, for participating, as well as the Chamber for hosting this. The Chamber put together 3 nights of debates to keep Shreveport as informed as possible. A round of applause for the Chamber of Commerce. And thank you to Southern University for hosting us this evening. Their venue and facility has been beautiful. And please stay informed throughout this election. Be as informed of a voter as you can be when you step into that booth on November the 8th. Other than that, Jackie and I will see you tonight when you join us on NBC 6 News at 10 o'clock. Have a great night.